All right, so I'm going to get into how to do some landscape editing and creation. So I took some time, kind of went in, created some hills, and then a spot for some of the water to come in, and then I created this little waterfall with some rocks at the bottom. It's pretty simple. I'm going to go over a few things. Just an FYI, when you go to open Lumion again, and you go to use the live sync with Rhino, you want to open the Rhino file and then open the Lumion file separate so that you have them both open at the same time, and then go click the live sync button up in Rhinos. If you don't open Lumion before you click this play button, it's going to try and open up a whole new scene. So instead, what you'll do is you'll open up your Rhino model, and then you'll open up your Lumion file. Both will be open at the same time, and then you click live sync, and everything should open up. So some quick landscape editing and creation tools that you have available to you. You're going to come down here and click landscape, and here you're going to have a little option called height. Click that, and you're going to have all these tools: raise land, lower land, flatten, jitter, and smooth. So you can use all of these to start to create these raised areas, hills, mountains, all that kind of stuff. And so what you'll do is you're going to go in. You can set your brush size to be bigger or smaller, and your brush speed is how much effect it has when you click and drag. So I'm going to set both of these down pretty low, and then I'm going to click the raise option, and I'm just going to click and drag, and it's going to start raising. Okay, I can make the brush speed a little bit more, and when I click and drag, it's really going to start to edit the landscape, and it automatically produces this rock effect when the slope gets too much for grass to be growing on it. So just kind of let that happen. You have your little undo button down at the bottom. And so what you can do is you just kind of go in, depress or raise the landscape as needed. Smoothing kind of does exactly what it does. Smoothens out areas. Flatten is going to flatten out a space until it's kind of perfectly flat. And then jitter does the opposite, where it starts to create a more randomized set of slopes and bumps and that kind of thing. And so I just took some time to kind of go in. I worked my way around the building and started raising up the land until it met different portions of the structure. Obviously, what you're looking for are, you don't want to have any holes in between seams. You don't want to have, moments where you can see underneath the building if it doesn't make sense that it would want to do that. And then you pull around and you start to see where it begins to pull away and sort of dives into this little pool, which we'll get into in a second. And then I just kind of modify the land. So up in here, I'm not really sure what the architecture is like for the building under here. There might be, an actual space under here if there's a basement or something like that. I think there's a couple foundation walls, but you can go back to your Rhino model and add in, and then use the live sync to kind of put them in place. So there's a little bit of back and forth that you can do to create the land as it needs to be. You can spend a lot of time working on this, so just be careful that you're not spending hours and hours doing this. And then as for the water, basically what that is in Rhino, I've added in a couple planes. So I've got this water plane here. I've got this water plane here. And you'll notice that I've got two different materials selected for them or created for them. I've got a water material for this flat area, which is the pond. And then I've got a second material called waterfall. And then I created just this little simple surface that flows over. The trick is getting them to align properly in Lumion. So what you'll have to do is create the plane, live sync it to Lumion, and then kind of go back and forth between the two until the plane is at the correct height. And then you kind of manipulate the landscape around the water to get it to fit correctly. And then making the plane water is simply adding material to it. So you'll go into your material tab. You can select the water material. You've got a water option at the top, and you can select through any one of these. And then for the waterfall, you'll select that. And this is just kind of a different area. You can go to new instead of using various, switch to new, and you have this little waterfall option. And you can make it appear as though it's a waterfall, and what happens is any surface, as it progressively gets more vertical, Lumion knows to add in that sort of waterfall effect as it turns the corner and goes down. Then the last thing I've done in terms of landscape is add a couple rocks down here at the bottom. So I'm going to hit escape to get out of my paint. I'm going to go into objects, place, and you can get out of imported. Oh, down here, you'll go to, instead of imported models, you can click nature. You have all of these options. So I just went under rocks, found a couple rocks, and you can start placing them. Once you have them placed, you can go back to your select tab. And if you need to move them around, you kind of just hover over it. This little thing pops up. This little 4 arrow box is free move, so it'll move anywhere, up, down, left, right. You can also constrain it to move up and down only and move back and forth only. Or you can do specific movements. So I just placed 4 rocks at the bottom of the waterfall because Lumion doesn't really do a good job at rendering the intersection between the waterfall and the water. There's just not like a good splash sort of thing, or at least I haven't looked into that yet. So again, all of your nature effects live under here, and you just sort of start placing them by clicking this little place button, and you can run through. There's all sorts of stuff. There's trees, there's let's see, grass, and then when you're placing, you also have the option of different place types. So if you want to fill up an area really quick, if I'm over here and I want to create a bunch of these little plants, okay, I can either click once, twice, and start placing them. I can also mass place in a linear line. So you just kind of click and drag, or not click and drag, but you click one point, click a second point, and it's going to place them. You can change the number of items, direction that they sit. You can do randomized direction, always do that. Randomize, there's a bunch of effects that you can do over a different space. And then you can also force height on landscape, which is going to make them fit to whatever height they are at the landscape rather than having them all at the same height. It's really important to use. So you can do that. And then, again, you can look at trees, and then I'm going to click confirm to return the build mode. And then we can look at trees if you want to place a couple of those. And you can do clusters. So I want to just do that. And then there's a bunch of clusters of trees. Or you can do paint placement, which paints trees on. If you want to go through that as well. You can also erase as well through the paint tool. So you just kind of have to explore to see what's available to you in terms of creating these landscapes. Again, the more detail you put in, the more realistic it's going to come out. And then, spend some time on that, and then once you kind of add in whatever vegetation you need, some little tips and tricks, you can add vegetation along seams between two different materials if you haven't quite worked it out yet. Like, that doesn't look totally realistic, so you might want to build up some grass or something like that along there just to kind of hide the edge. And then the other thing you can do is you can go back into landscape. And if you want to do grass, you can click just this little landscape grass button, toggle it on. And when you get really close, you'll start to see how it's applying grass. So if I turn this on and off, and then you can do grass size. If you want to make it taller or bigger. You have grass height. I'll make it really tall. And again, see how that kind of hides that seam there? It's kind of helpful. And wildness is basically how like patchy it is. So you can mess around with that as well. And that's pretty much it for landscaping. It's pretty basic. You just have to familiarize yourself with all of the options that you have. You want to try and be as realistic with the types of vegetation that you're going to use, with the type of water. For something like this, you don't want to use like ocean or tropical water, which wouldn't make sense or it wouldn't look right. So mess around with that. And then you can also dive into, there's a whole mess of stuff down there. There's indoor objects if you want to do furniture and all that kind of stuff, plumbing. There's outdoor objects that you guys can start to mess around with, cars, people, all that kind of stuff. I think a lot of these people, the nice thing is it's already, the animations for all this stuff is already kind of baked in. So there's predefined movements and all that sort of thing that you can really start to mess around with. All those things are just sort of accessories to help you kind of build up all of the information in your scene. So feel free to mess around with that for a little while.